Welcome to Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage, where we proudly celebrate and promote new Australian authors and their stories. I'm Fiona Taylor, host of Reading by Candlelight, a community of readers brought together by Molly, founder and owner of Molly's Cottage, a sustainable gifting business. Molly's Cottage offer a monthly book box promoting a debut or emerging Australian writer, and their book is accompanied by selected local products complementing the novel's setting or protagonist. We hope that you enjoyed this month's chat with our Reading by Candlelight book box author. Welcome, Mercedes Mercier, to Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It is so lovely to have you here to talk about your brilliant new thriller, Black Lies. And I have my nails match.
I know, they match perfectly. I'm so impressed. I think I need to do the same, put some on.
I took the book to the nail salon.
Oh my gosh, you are so brilliant. I love that. I'm going to do that for my launch. You've inspired.
And we can have a photo of us both with our nails. Excellent. Yeah. Now, first, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Here at Reading by Candlelight, we're all about celebrating new voices, and so I add my appreciation of Aboriginal stories handed down for generations. Now, Mercedes Mercier is the author of two absolutely brilliant thrillers. And Mercedes, apologies, because I'm going to embarrass you, but I have to tell you how much I loved your debut, White Lies. It is one of the strongest Australian thriller debuts I've ever read.
Oh,
now, honestly, it's a masterclass in backstory. And if we have any writers listening, make certain that you read White Lies, because if you haven't already, because it is a case study in how to write a gripping psychological thriller while immersing the reader in story. It is so clever.
Thank you so much. Oh, that's just, I'm blushing now.
I can see. I'm sorry. I told you I'd embarrass you. But it really is, like, I couldn't believe that was the first novel you'd ever written.
Thank you.
It was such a shock.
Honestly, that's the best possible feedback I could have gotten, truly.
You're very welcome. Now, while your debut was a huge success, it was difficult to see how you were going to better it. And you've definitely hit this out of the park with Black Lies. I just want to clarify that both books can be read as standalones. And while I think that the reading experience is enhanced by reading both, it's not necessary to have read White Noise to read Black Lies, because you've done it so cleverly. The way that you've written it is that people can pick it up and just go straight into the story. Now,
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was really important. I wanted people to be able to pick up Black Lies and still be able to enjoy it and understand it just as much, whether they had or hadn't read White Noise prior.
Now, you've returned to Westmead Prison with your fabulous protagonist, criminal psychologist Dr. Laura Fleming, and the result is a polished, page-turning and cleverly plotted novel that truly delivers. Now, readers are going to be kept guessing through the many twists and turns as the story speeds towards a heart-stopping finale. And it has such a fabulous cover too. I'm going to show the cover again, because I just love that cover. You must have been so happy with that.
I was just so thrilled when I saw it. And I think, as you probably know, authors tend to not get, a whole lot of say in what their cover looks like. And so it's always like a little bit nervous, when you see that email come through with the cover attached. And I knew that, like, I was so happy with the cover for White Noise. They'd done such a good job with that I felt, I felt confident that Black Lies was going to be just as good. But I think when I just opened the picture and just saw that front cover artwork, I just breathed just a sigh of relief and just a sigh of just like, oh my gosh, I'm just so happy with it, just in love with it.
It's going to stand out in bookshops as well, which is, always a difficult thing to do. But I think that, you've got that really block color and the yellow, it's just going to make it pop. It's just fabulous. And I think that this book is going to cement you as one of Australia's go-to authors.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know it's hard. I know it's hard to hear. It's hard to receive compliments, but it really is that strong.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I know that this is your first podcast interview for Black Lies, isn't it?
It is, and I'm so, so happy that it was with you.
Well, I am honoured, and remembering that we don't do spoilers here at Reading by Candlelight, because we want everyone to experience the book when they're reading it. Can you give us the elevator pitch for Black Lies?
Sure. So, as I said earlier, it is a standalone thriller. So, you don't have to have read White Noise to understand it or enjoy it. But it does pick up about 18 months after White Noise finished. So we're back with Dr. Laura Fleming at Westmead Prison in Sydney. And one of the state's most high-profile inmates who, committed this heinous crime, he's diagnosed with terminal cancer and only has a few weeks left to live. And when he committed this crime, he, for 15 years, has refused to disclose where he left the victim's body. And so Dr. Laura Fleming is brought in as sort of a last resort, a last-ditch attempt to convince this murderer to disclose where he left his victim's remains, so the victim's family can finally get a little bit of closure. And the pressure is obviously on Laura because there's only a really limited amount of time that she's got to win this person over and convince them to disclose this this secret that they've kept for 15 years. So Laura sits in sessions with the murderer. She tries to build a relationship, build a certain level of trust with him. And as she starts doing this, she starts to realize that something isn't quite feeling quite right. Something's just not sitting quite right in the situation with her. And so she starts to sort of dig a little bit deeper. And, as she inches closer to the truth, she starts to realize that, there's certain people out there who will stop at nothing to keep the past hidden.
Oh, that's excellent, Z. Yes, I loved those scenes between her and the prisoner Thomas. I think that they were so well done. And then when everything starts to head up and you realize that there's somebody out to get her, then it all just gets so exciting. I loved that that it's not just all in the prison. Like, you've got the outside, you've got her personal life, you've got a lot of things going on, and it all ties together so well.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to set a vast majority of it inside the prison, but I also wanted to show Laura as, a layered character who's got this outside life. She doesn't, she loves her job and she puts her whole heart into her job, but she's also, a mother, and she's got other things going on in her life, as well as this highly demanding job that she sort of throws herself into, I guess.
And the setting of a prison is refreshingly original. What made you decide to set your books there?
So I have a background in the criminal justice system. I've worked in the corrections system for the past 10 years. So I think basically I always knew that I wanted to set, my novels in a prison. I've just have all these wonderful and terrible, background experience within me that I think not a lot of people sort of have an insight into. I think, the sort of the prison system is quite removed from, rightly so, from, everyday society. And so a lot of people don't really know what goes on behind the walls. They might have heard, sort of horror stories about the, the negative sides of the prison system. But I sort of wanted to balance that with writing from the perspective of a character who goes into a prison every day, who really is trying to do her best to, help offenders to rehabilitate. They've done this awful thing, they're in prison for that crime. She's there to try and help them work through their offending behaviors, what caused them to offend, and to try and stop that from happening again. So, these people can be released. They're functioning members of society. They're not going to commit more crimes. They're not going to be causing future victims of crime. And I just wanted to show that there's people out there who are doing this wonderful work day in, day out, that's hugely, hugely important to community safety, but might not, often get a light shone on them.
It works so well because there's grades of criminals as well, and so she wants to help the ones that can be helped.
That's
and
right.
then you've got ones like Thomas that cannot be helped, but she still needs to get information from him. And so I think that it shows really well with all the different characters that she interacts with, how empathetic she is and how much she believes that everyone can be rehabilitated.
I love Laura. She's just, I think there's a lot of me in Laura. She's very idealistic. She loves her job. She believes in second chances, and she believes in helping people to, to be better people than when they came into prison. She wants them to leave as better people. That's her passion in life, and that's her calling. And she just has this beautiful empathetic quality about her, where she just goes into a situation, with people that, and I'm not condoning or excusing committing crimes, but this population of people who the majority of the time have had a lot of trauma in their past, have grown up within this cycle of crime that they've unfortunately perpetuated. And she comes from a more privileged sort of background. She's been able to spend all these years at university studying, and she has dedicated her life to helping these people break these cycles of crime and to, I guess, get them on the right track again.
Laura's she feels like a bit of every woman to me, which makes her very relatable as a character. But she is a flawed character, which makes her even more fascinating. And I think you handle her past masterfully in both of the novels. And how did you come up with her? I mean, you've said that some of her is a little bit of you.
I started out with the bits of her that were me. So I started out with that sort of that idealistic, that really wanting to give back, to help vulnerable people, and to help, sort of a situation and an environment that might not get a lot of light sort of shone on it in society. But then I didn't want her to be just this, this Pollyanna sort of character that's, come from this, this privileged lifestyle, and she's out here doing, great things every day, and she's just this perfect sort of character that's, I guess, unrelatable, because, no one's perfect. Everyone's got, all these flaws and intricacies about them. And so, without giving too much away sort of about her past, because that sort of gets unraveled a little bit in White Noise, there was, an incident in her past career that led to her having a dependence on painkillers. And during one of the times when she was dependent on painkillers, something happened with her child, And throughout the whole of White Noise, she just carried this burden of shame and guilt. She just beat herself up continuously for this situation that happened, and that allowed her husband, at the time, to take advantage of that and really manipulate her and control her using that guilt and shame that she carried. I wanted to make her just this character that had these peaks and troughs, that, on one side she just wants to help other people and is all about, rehabilitation, but on the other side, she's got these things in her past too that she's still struggling to deal with. Just so there was, she was just this sort of layered, relatable character.
What I'm interested in is, what kind of research do you do for your novels? Now, I know that you've worked in the system, but I would imagine, given the plot, there'd be quite a lot of research required.
There is. So I guess I was lucky in a lot of respects that on the prison front, the workings of the prison and, the ins and outs and the tensions and the day-to-day routines of the inmates and that kind of stuff was all in my head. So I could sort of, just write that sort of as it came. That's not to say I didn't have to fact check with people as well, because there was, various parts that I just wasn't across. So I guess that part of it was, aside from fact checking at the end, that part of it was fairly straightforward. But I did have to, as she's a criminal psychologist, I'm not a psychologist, I did have to do a lot of research on that front. I'm very lucky that I've got a friend who actually went to high school with, who I work with in the criminal justice system. And she was actually the person that sort of gave me the first spark of inspiration for my first book, White Noise. I was sitting having lunch with her one day, and she was just talking about, sort of what she had on for the rest of the day. And she was just explaining that, one of the parts of her role is this, conducting these risk assessments and interviews with inmates who are coming up for, eligibility for early release onto parole. And part of her job is to speak to them and to, assess their suitability from a psychological standpoint, and then, write up this risk assessment, which then goes to, the parole board for their, eventual decision. And I just thought, wow, that is such a huge, a huge and important responsibility to sit on one person's shoulders. And that was kind of how I thought I'd actually love to write from this character's perspective that does this. And so I went to her for a lot of my psychology questions and sort of ins and outs of what it's like being a psychologist working in a prison, especially, a female psychologist working in a men's prison. I've also got a friend who's a police officer. So, I could go to him for a lot of would this work? Is this what a police officer would do, in this situation? And then obviously I had to do, a bit of research into, drug addiction, coercive control, childhood trauma, those kinds of themes that flow through both of the books.
Now, White Noise came out last year?
Yes, June last year.
So this is only a year later. So how soon after White Noise did you begin writing Black Lies?
Well, when I put White Noise out to submission, and it was going through the submission process with HarperCollins, they asked me, do you have an idea for a second novel? And so thankfully I'd had this sort of idea just brewing in the back of my mind. In my day job, one of the teams that's not part of my team but that I work closely with were helping some legislation go through Parliament, which was it's in South Australia, called the No Body, No Parole legislation, which is basically exactly as it sounds, that if, an offender is convicted of murder but is not disclosing where they've hidden their victim's body, then they're not eligible for parole. So that's where I sort of came up with with that idea. I pitched that idea, just a really short, it was a couple of lines to HarperCollins when I was pitching White Noise, and they said, yep, great, love it, sounds great, can you write up a synopsis for us for that? So I went back and wrote that up, and sort of had the idea basically from a couple of years ago. So I think I started writing Black Lies early last year. So I think maybe January-ish last year. And it took me, I'm a very routine driven person. I know this about myself. I know that I have to sit down and I have to write the same amount of words 5 days a week, and I can't get my bum out of the chair until I've written that word count every single day. And that word count's 1,200 words every single day, or sorry, 5 days. And that's just purely because I work full time also, and also I'm an inherently lazy person. So if I skip one of those days, don't get my word count done for that day, I know that the next day I'll be like, oh, I didn't do it yesterday, that's all right, I can, I can just give it another day, I can just leave it another day. And I won't write until I feel, until I feel inspired, until I feel like I want to sit there. But, as we know, writing is a full-time job of itself, and you've got to hit these deadlines, and you've got to get this manuscript in. So I think it took me about 4 months to write, when writing to that schedule, but then I had to put it away and do some really heavy editing on it after that first draft was written.
That is so impressive, Mercedes, that you work full time and you have written 2 novels.
I don't have children yet, so I don't have that added busyness sort of to my life, so I can sort of carve out that that time either before or after my day job to write. So I guess that's
no, it's still impressive. I just think that it's amazing that you managed to hold down a full-time important job and just sit yourself down and get the words down, and which is really impressive. Now, what I wanted to know is that this is always a favorite question. You can't have a favorite child, but which character do you enjoy writing the most?
It's a good question. I love Laura. Like writing, slipping back into her was just like slipping back into a second home. I felt right at home straight away. I love writing her. It just flows really, really effortlessly. But Laura can be a little bit rigid. She's a rule. She breaks the rules, but inside she likes rules, and she's very professional. She sort of doesn't really let herself go very often. So I really love writing sort of the counterpoint to that, who's Sam. And she's I think in the book she's described as a bit of a force of nature. She has no respect for the rules. She's so beautifully herself and doesn't care what anyone thinks, and I just admire that about her, and I always just have so much fun writing her and being that person, because to be honest, I wish I could be a little bit more like Sam and just not care as much what other people think, and just I am who I am, and if you like me, great, if you don't, I'm not bothered.
I'm glad that you mentioned Sam, because I love her. I think she's one of the best sidekicks. She's so funny. She always hits the nail on the head with her biting little comments. And she just, and it is obvious that you have fun with her because her lines are just perfect. Love it. And I also enjoy the dynamic between Laura and her daughter Riley as they continue to negotiate their damaged relationship. And I think that you got her down really well, because like you said, you don't have children yourself. It's not an easy thing to do, to write teenagers, especially unless you have one of your own. So
I'm lucky that I work quite closely with with people who do have teenagers themselves. So, you know, every day I get to hear their stories, and obviously it's not the same as having a teenager, clearly, but you know, I could turn to those colleagues and just sort of ask, oh, you know, what are your daughters into at the moment? You know, how would they react in this situation? How would they, you know, if you were to ask them this question, what would they say? You know, all of those kinds of things that I could sort of turn to for that authenticity and really getting that flavor through it.
Now, for all our writers listening, I think I can guess this. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a massive pantser. And it can cause a little bit of problems writing, you know, writing a crime thriller, because at the beginning I don't know who, you know, what's going to happen, what's going to be the, you know, the ins and outs, what's going to be the relationships, what's going to be the reasoning or the, you know, the motivation. I will get to the end of a first draft and, you know, it'll all come, like the climax, the culmination will come to me, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, now I have to go back and, you know, pepper clues and red herrings through it. But I've tried to plot, and, you know, I've sat down and I've pulled up a Word document, and I've started to, you know, to think about how it's going to look and structure it out. But then I always just get bored and just want to dive straight in and just start the writing. So it's never really stuck with me, although, you know, I can imagine it would probably be a lot easier if I had this perfectly beautifully laid out, you know, plan to follow when I write.
Well, you surprise me because it's so well plotted. I just assumed that you plotted it first.
I think I like to have a little bit of a framework, I guess. I like to know sort of what themes I want to address in it, and what the main sort of crux of the novel is going to be. And sometimes I have a vague idea of the ending, but how I get sort of between those points just comes to me as I write, and that's how I think I enjoy writing the most. And you know, I'll still be writing, and like something will come up and I'll be like, oh my gosh, yes, and it just like unfolds as I'm writing, and it just goes down, you know, a completely different path, or, you know, a plot point just works out as I'm writing it. And I figure it's, you know, it's worked for me that way for 2 books. So I'm a bit superstitious. I'm not going to change up the way I do things.
That's understandable. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
Now, do you have any advice you could give anyone that's writing to get published?
I think the best advice I can give is just find what works for you, because every writer, author, everyone's journey is just so different. Everyone's life circumstances, you know, are just so different. So like talking about how I write, how I have to, you know, hit a word count five days a week, that's what works for me and my situation and my personality. But that's, you know, someone's going to be completely different. They might, you know, need to write 10,000 words in a day, and then, you know, leave it for 2 weeks and then write in another burst. I think, you know, sometimes there's so much, you know, advice out there that it can be overwhelming, and, you know, you can sort of hear stuff and think, oh, well, I don't do that, so I must not be, you know, doing the right thing, or I'm not going to get anywhere because my writing routine looks different to this person who's been published. I just think, you know, like with anything in life, it's just individual, and it's just what works for you. But I do think something that's important for everyone across the board is just to find some writing support. You know, find your tribe, find some other authors or writers, you know, that are going through the same thing as you are, because, you know, we spend so much time sitting in a room alone behind a laptop, behind a computer, and it's just so important, I think, to have this community of people that you can turn to who if you don't have other writers, you know, in your day-to-day life, like I didn't know anyone in my, you know, immediate circle that wanted to write. I just found that as soon as I connected with other people that were doing the same thing, and that I could just, you know, talk their ear off about writing and books, and they weren't gonna, you know, they weren't gonna get bored. It just made such a huge difference to me. And, you know, those are the people that are going to, you know, when you get a rejection after rejection after rejection, like we all do, those are the people that are going to understand and really commiserate with you. And, you know, they're also the people that are going to celebrate the hardest with you, you know, when you do get that success. So I think just having that support is just so important.
Yeah, and we've talked on the podcast many times with authors about how important the support from the writing community is, and how everybody's so lovely.
Gosh, that was one of the biggest surprises, I think, when I got, or even before I was published, I think, is just how beautiful and open and supportive the writing community is. There's no gatekeeping, there's no jealousy, there's no bitterness. People aren't trying to keep other authors down so they can rise higher. You know what I mean? That everyone is trying to bring everyone else up, and it's just so supportive, and it's just such a beautiful community to be a part of. So I guess, you know, you've obviously spoken about it so much on the podcast, so your, you know, listeners will understand, but that's, you know, that's something that I like aspiring authors to know, is that the community is so friendly and so wonderful that you should have no fear about, you know, about joining it.
No, that's right. And I mean, and just going out to events and going to book launches and things like that, you get to meet other people who are writing as well. You know, it's not just authors that go to these things, and you see the same people again and again and again, and you make connections with them. And then that makes you feel, you know, that you're part of something. I think you're right. It's just so important.
That feeling of community is just, you know, it's just so important as human beings, isn't it?
It is. Now, for our readers, can you recommend a book by an Australian author that you've read recently? And yes, you can have more than one.
Yes, excellent. I've got two sitting right here. The first one, part of, you know, one of the best parts of being an author, I think, is that we get sent these beautiful arcs, which are advanced reader copies. And I got sent The Drowning Girls by Veronica Lando. And Veronica Lando was the HarperCollins Banjo Prize winner. She wrote her debut was The Whispering, which was just incredible. So when I got The Drowning Girls, I was just so excited. And I think if you love The Whispering, you are going to love The Drowning Girls just even better. I just think Veronica just writes atmosphere and setting just so immersively. I was reading this book, and it's set in tropical far north Queensland, cold in Adelaide. I was sitting there just reading this book, and every time I was interrupted by something, I felt like physically like I was being jolted out of this caravan park in tropical far north Queensland. And she's just got this incredible way of just immersing the reader, like just grabbing the reader and just pulling you into the pages. And this book is just incredible. Like, it's an incredible follow-up. And my other one is the brilliant Candice Fox, her latest Fire with Fire. Like, no one writes a blockbuster like Candice. She is just she's the queen of Aussie crime. Her characters, I swear, you fall in love with her characters on the first page, don't you? Like, she just writes characters just so wonderfully. She grabs you from the first page. You know it's going to be an epic action ride the entire way through. And this was just incredible. I just inhaled it.
And Candice is such a fantastic supporter of Australian crime writers.
Candice is one of the most supportive authors and people out there. She's just so incredible. She, during COVID, she did this weekly write club where, you know, anyone that was writing a novel could get together with her. She streamed it live on Facebook. We all wrote for, I think it was an hour, and then there was an hour where she just answered questions from writers, and she was just so open and just so accessible, and she just does that for authors all the time. So she's one of those examples of authors that are at the top of their game, who are out there, but who are also turning around and giving a hand up to other authors to make sure that other people can be at her level. She's just incredible.
That's fabulous. And Veronica's book, The Drowning Girls, is our book box for next month.
It is too. Oh, that's brilliant.
So your book box buddies.
Yay.
I think that your books lend themselves to be a fabulous series. And hint to any producers out there, I'm sure there's none listening, but if there was, if you were casting the screen adaptation of your book, who would you like to see to play Laura?
That's a very good question, because when I first started writing White Noise, I think I just watched, did you ever see The Stranger on Netflix? It's a Harlan Coben adapt. And there was an actor on it, and her name, Siobhan Finneran. And she was also in this brilliant English crime. I watch a lot of English crime, called Happy Valley.
Yes.
And so I'd seen her, and I had a photo of her cut out, and I put that up on my whiteboard. And that's who I had at the beginning. I feel like maybe it's sort of transformed a little bit since then, but I actually can't think of who could play her perfectly. I loved Mayor of Easttown, and I think there's a bit of a bit of Mayor in Laura, so the Kate Winslet sort of style. But I mean, look, I'd love someone to tell me who they can picture, but I have to say I did picture Hugh Jackman as Paul.
Hugh Jackman. Oh.
I mean, wouldn't we all love Hugh Jackman?
That would be great. I think for Laura, I would choose Sarah Snook from Succession.
Yes. Do you know what's funny? I actually went to high school with Sarah Snook, so I might have an in. I might have an in with her.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, imagine. Yes, no, I really think that Sarah is such a fine actor, and she would be able to play Laura, strength and vulnerabilities, and have it all show on her face. Yes,
you're so right. That's so true. Now I'm picturing her in Succession, and yep, I can see that. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm going to be picturing Sarah when I'm writing her.
And who do you think for Sam?
That's a really good question. I feel like I'd like someone like Celeste Barber, who's got
sassy
humor, that sassiness, a little bit sort of, a little bit rough around the edges, but she's got that real heart of gold. And again, sort of like a little bit flawed, but you can tell that everything she does comes from a good place. And I think
that's a really good choice, because I think that, it's an amusing character. You want somebody who's got great comedic timing to play them.
Yes.
Okay. And so Hugh Jackman for Paul. All right.
In an ideal world.
We'll put our orders in. Now, I'm very excited for your next book. Is there anything you can tell us about it?
Well, my next book is actually completely different. Well, it's still in the crime thriller genre. It's still in the same genre, but doesn't actually feature Laura, not set in a prison at all. So it's a bit of a departure. Not saying that her story's over. That's still, I've still got lots and lots of ideas for Laura for the future. But what I can say is it's set in a remote, luxurious area, and there is a murder, multiple murders.
Ooh, multiple murders. I love multiple. I don't know what that makes me, but I do. I love that. And do you get to go to the gorgeous location and check it out?
I have. So it's really loosely based on Kangaroo Island, which is an island off South Australia.
I
So
think that's beautiful.
yeah, so and sort of a little bit. I went to Rottnest Island recently, so I'm picking and choosing. It's going to be a fictional island, so I'm sort of picking and choosing bits from each island, and sort of mashing them together into this fictional place.
That sounds fabulous. Now, how soon can we expect it?
I'm hoping for 2024, so next year.
Black Lies is the June book box for Molly's Cottage, and you chose Shaw and Smith's Savvy Bee as the drink, and Fresh Sage and Driftwood as the candle scent. And can you tell us why and how they tie into the story?
Sure. So Black Lies is set during a heat wave, weeks and weeks of temperatures over 40 degrees, which adds to the tension and the sort of the heat and the claustrophobia of the book. And there's a couple of scenes in there where Laura is relaxing with various people, and because it's so hot there, the alcoholic drink of choice is white wine to cool them down. And I love Shaw and Smith. They're a great South Australian winery, so they're my favorite. So I thought combine, give a shout out to a local winery. And the Sage and Driftwood, the beach. Laura lives at Bondi Beach, and the water is a really great therapy for her. Whenever she's feeling overwhelmed, she gets down to the beach and goes for a swim. So I knew I wanted something that was beachy and had that sort of sea salty sort of smell to it. So you could light the candle and picture yourself at Bondi Beach with Laura.
I think that's one of the most fun thing about the book boxes is that Molly gives the authors the opportunity to choose things that go with the book.
I loved that so much. I just had so much fun with that. I was so excited when she asked me. I was like, oh, I'm going to sit down and have a lot of fun with this.
Congratulations, Mercedes. Black Lies is such a twisty, compelling, and addictive thriller. It was so difficult to put down. It's already had so much love on Goodreads with lots of 5-star reviews, and I'm certain that it'll only grow once it's been published. And I'd like to thank HarperCollins and yourself for the arc of Black Lies, because it allowed me to read it prior to this interview.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank you so much, yourself and your beautiful daughter Molly, for having Black Lies as the June book box, and for just being such incredible supports of debut and emerging Australian authors. It's so incredible to have that support, and I've just loved it so much. So thank you.
You're very welcome. After I read White Noise last year, I knew that your second book had to be in the book box.
Thank you.
So on behalf of Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage, I want to thank you today for being a June book box author. And I know everyone who's ordered this book box is going to love your book as much as I have, as well as enjoying the treats that come with it. And we wish you all the best for Black Lies publication on the 7th of June. And I truly believe, Mercedes, and I hope that you believe this too, that you have a brilliant career as an author ahead. And I can't wait to see where this book takes you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. That means so much to me. You're wonderful. Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today, Mercedes. Thank you.
Thank you.